Joint Interim Committee on Marijuana Legalization. We're going to have several informational meetings today. This will be really important and helpful, I think, because we're many months into implementing the work that we all crafted together at the end of, or during last session. So to preview the order in which we're going to tackle things, we're going to start with some remarks by people who are industry members to describe their perspective on how things are going, and then we're going to move to an OLCC agency update, an OHA update. We're going to hear from folks from the Department of Revenue and Agriculture, and then we're going to hear about some concepts and some work that's been underway in the interim regarding, we're going to hear a local update in a Controlled Substances Act, MIP, and other bill updates. We've got a lot going on. These are potential legislative concepts. So I'm getting started, even though not everyone on our committee is in the room. I'm going to call to order open an informational meeting on the status of a bunch of different topics. And I'm going to invite up to the table here Amy Margolis, Jeremy Kletke, Anthony Johnson, and Peter Gendron. Is it Gendron? Gendron? Thank you, everyone, for coming. You may proceed in any order, and we're hoping to take a total of 20 minutes for this section. But we know you're going to give us some really important information, but out of respect for the tight timeline, we'd love to have you get it all done in 20 minutes total, including questions. Who would like to begin?
Co-chairs, committee members, thank you for giving me the opportunity to provide testimony on the progress of cannabis implementation in Oregon. My name is Jeremy Kletke. I am the founder and acting CEO of Davis Farms. My background in commercial cannabis spans 23 years, 2 continents, and 4 countries. I have had the opportunity to work extensively with both medical cannabis and industrial hemp. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to provide this testimony on the progress of cannabis implementation in Oregon. In general, I feel the OLCC has responded well to the policy handed to them by the legislature, even in circumstances where we were learning this new industry on the fly. My only real concern with the state at large is around the recreational licensing process. Even with the accelerated rate at which the OLCC has begun to issue licenses, there seems to be a choke point there. I'm hearing from growers that they are concerned about the lack of testing facilities available and the extended wait period due to this issue. The problem may be further compounded by ORLAP and the implementation of cash testing. We're not sure yet.
No.
There's also a genuine concern about there being enough licensed retail outlets to handle intake of this year's outdoor harvest. But I know the OLCC has been working hard to see retailers, labs, and producers come online. I'm confident that license consolidation can go a long way towards helping to remedy most of these concerns. Furthermore, I was asked to share my thoughts on how my experience with rural Deschutes County has been up to today. Deschutes County is unique among some of the other conservative counties east of the Cascades and has over 1,800 medical grows currently. The established patient base supporting the retailers there shows that cannabis has been an accepted part of the culture in Bend and the surrounding areas for some time now. That being said, it appears that the county officials do not seem to recognize or want to regard the concerns of this part of their constituency. Going back some months to December of 2015, Deschutes County opted out of recreational cannabis, along with many other counties, stating that without the ability to place reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions on property zoned as exclusive farm use protected by the right to farm, they felt uncomfortable allowing this new crop to enter the county. Recognizing this concern, your committee members helped craft and guide an amazing piece of legislation last session, allowing a special carve-out to the Oregon Right to Farm Act, providing counties with the ability to place reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions on exclusive farm use zone property for this new crop. This carve-out gave Deschutes County a pathway to opt in, and they did indeed opt back into recreational licensure, albeit with a limited sense of showing a lack of concern for those constituents who have chosen to invest in Deschutes County early on. Furthermore, they created a process that is highly obstructive to anyone on the path to licensure. As a result of this restrictive path, only 4 of the hundreds of potential applicants for recreational licensure in Deschutes County have felt comfortable enough to apply. Here are a few of the restrictions the county commissioners have come up with for property zoned exclusive farm use. 1, a complete prohibition on outdoor production, which is the most efficient, least consumptive method of cultivation from a resource standpoint. Very important for a crop associated with high power consumption. 2, a noise limitation of 30 decibels at the property line, wherein a normal conversation can exceed 60 decibels, and the standard for other related issues is generally 50 decibels. 3, extensive odor mitigation requirements that are neither cost-effective nor energy efficient. Really important for the greenhouse growers that are really trying to bring an efficient practice into play for cannabis. 4, a land use notification and appeal process which goes against the verbiage in SB 1598 and turns the Lux into a land use decision. 475B.0633 states that a city or county action concerning a land use compatibility statement under this section is not a land use decision for purpose of ORS Chapter 195, 196, 197, or 215. It was intended that the TPM regulations would be treated as a building permit, and that there would be a clear set of guidelines, and that a technician could simply check each box against the rules for compliance. And lastly, a review period, provided there are no appeals, because we do have an appeal process which can take this all the way to LUBA, of 8 to 16 weeks, which seems unreasonable simply due to the fact that most counties are able to sign off on a complete Lux within a single business day. My personal experience in Lane County had me walk in at 3:30 on a Friday afternoon and walk out with a stamped Lux at 4:45. In my opinion, this is a more appropriate timeline for a highly compliant cannabis business who has already done the legwork to offer a complete Lux application which complies with the OLCC requirements. When we created the carve-out, our greatest fear was that it might be extended to crops out of cannabis and used in ways that could stifle agricultural producers that are already struggling both in Oregon and across the nation. We thought this might happen somewhere years down the road. In our worst nightmares, we could never have expected Deschutes County would make our fears reality within a matter of months by extending their light mitigation requirements to all farm crops, against everything that Right to Farm and the Oregon Farm Bureau have fought so hard to protect for over 40 years. In closing, I would like to appeal to you to help the counties and cities to see the importance of embracing this new crop that now that the voters have spoken. I understand the sensitivity of working to allow a crop that has been negatively stigmatized the way cannabis has, but the crop is here. Regulating and taxing it is something we should embrace, so we have the ability to shape the future of this highly valuable crop, rather than encourage people to keep it in the shadows. Thank you.
Thanks very much. In the interest of trying to move us forward, I really appreciate that input, and I think that we are receiving or have received some communication from the Deschutes County Commission with their perspective on the issue, but I really appreciate your place marking that for us. It's important. Amy, would you like to go next? Do I see questions for right now? No. You're going to really hear what you have to say.
Madam Chairs and members of the committee, my name is Amy Margolis, and I'm here on behalf of the Oregon Cannabis Association, and I'm also a practicing attorney. We are at a crucial moment in the transition from the medical program to the adult use market. OLCC and OHA, along with all of the industry participants, have been doing a wonderful job responding to and adapting to the rapid changes happening. I spoke with over 40 member businesses on Wednesday, and everyone wants to express their appreciation for the hard agency work. However, we are facing an insurmountable deadline with October 1st that the cannabis business community is simply not ready for, along with the agencies. We are asking the committee to extend the October 1st deadline for both the testing requirements and for the packaging and labeling requirements. I recognize the committee does not extend the deadlines, but that's how I go. This deadline is not statutory and should be shifted. We are proposing the following with the agencies sitting behind. 1, the testing deadline should be extended for at a minimum 30 days. The OHA should allow dispensaries to continue taking in product tested under the pre-October protocol for whatever that extension time period is. The dispensary should clearly mark the product so consumers understand that other products in the store have been more vigorously tested. This additional 30 days or 45 or 60 days will allow an on-ramp for the new testing regime and ensure that there is not a serious and full stop to the industry. We have been hearing the same thing from industry participants across the board. The labs are not ready, they cannot do it fast enough, and it will be a full stop if this extension doesn't happen. Second, the packaging and labeling rules should either be extended or modified. The Oregon Cannabis Association recommends that the deadline be extended again at least another 30 days. We are 7 days away from enforcement for both the testing requirements and the new packaging requirements. It is impossible to get sophisticated packaging and labeling manufactured in such a short time period, let alone get it approved. What we're recommending is that product be, right now how it's set up is that product will have to be returned to vendors, repackaged, and relabeled before it can be taken back in after October 1st. This is going to create an enormous logjam. We are asking that the agencies consider modifying those rules, extending that time period, and allowing dispensaries to sell off the material that they have in their stores past October 1st, even if it is not packaged and labeled according to the October 1st rules. This would be consistent with the testing rules that allow pre-tested material to stay on the shelves and be sold off so long as there is labeling indicating that it was tested pre-October 1st. This extension is crucial for the survival of many businesses. These rules were drafted based on assumptions of where the industry and agencies would be by the state. Everyone is working as fast as they can. These deadlines are virtually unmeetable and were set arbitrarily. They can and should be moved. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much. We'll probably talk about that a bit more, and for now we'll proceed on to Mr. Johnson. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Anthony Johnson, Chief Commissioner, Measure 91, usually representing New Providence, Oregon. Today I'm sitting in for my friend and colleague Casey Luhan, Director of the Oregon Retailers of Cannabis Association, and Biggie sent his comments to the committee, and I agree with his sentiment there. We would all like to thank the work of the 91 committee and the agencies involved who have been adaptive to the needs of the industry. The Retailers Association definitely wants to thank the committee for the start of retail sales and the expansion of the retail sales to adults through OHA regulated dispensaries. The Retailers Association has, their members have experienced anywhere from 10 to 50% increase in revenue, which has allowed them to expand their businesses and hire more people. And moving into these deadlines, I have to agree with Amy on the need to be reasonable and adaptive to the packaging, to the testing, and because we are reaching a point where there could be a bottleneck and disruption with the industry could make things come to a halt, and that would be bad for non-industry, consumers, patients, but also put product potentially into the illicit underground market. Additionally, to being receptive to changing some of the deadlines, a expedited license through the OLCC could be utilized to where people have been registered with OHA, good actors, apply for the OLCC license, but because of the timing issues, to give them an incentive to come into the system, they could be given a 6-month window to come up with the security requirements and other regulations that may be needed, so long as they have agreed to work on those issues, agreed to an inspection, agreed to tracking, pay the fee, and come into the system to make sure we do bring people into the regulated and tracked system to be issued as well. And additionally, some other pieces of legislation, the Retail Association is definitely concerned about the costs to low-income patients. So really interested in any type of low-income patient assistance, both through a program that can help fund patients who are on SSI, Oregon Health Plan, get access to medical cannabis. Additionally, any help with the fee of the cards. Some patients have mobility issues, have conditions that can never improve, and so to force them to renew every single year can be cost prohibitive and detrimental to their well-being. Additionally, stopping the discrimination that some patients face when they go to get a card from their doctor or when they're on pain medication. And you have patients who are trying to get off opioids and addictive, lethal drugs, but they're told they can't use medical cannabis. And I'd like to see that resolved where patients aren't discriminated against unnecessarily, and we're pushing people to use more addictive, more harmful drugs instead of medical cannabis. And lastly, the Retail Association definitely wants the Joint Committee to stay around. I think it's done great work, and it would really disrupt the cannabis industry if we have to go through different agencies and catch everybody up, because you guys have done a good job of being educated on the issue and being adaptive to the needs. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this time, Madam Chairs, members of the committee. I'm Pioneer Keith Gendron. I'm here today as the president of the Oregon Sun-Grown Growers Guild. It is a pleasure and a privilege to be sitting before you today. The Oregon Sun-Grown Growers Guild was founded prior to the passage of Measure 91 to advocate, protect, and promote traditional sun-grown medicinal cannabis and the people who choose to use it. Since then, Oregon has expanded the cannabis market, and our mission has expanded while retaining our core focus on the sun-grown cultivating community. In the 22 months since Oregon legalized cannabis and cannabis products for adult use, myself and members of my guild have served the state in many capacities. We sit on committees at the OHA, OMMP, the OLCC, act in an advisory capacity to our state legislature. And that's just among other things. Oregon has made great strides in regulation and distribution in this short period of time, and all of those involved are to be commended for their efforts. However, we are also here today to address concerns and promote further improvements and developments for our marijuana programs. What we are doing here in Oregon for Oregonians has far-reaching implications, not just for the half of the country that is already legalized in some fashion, but for the other half, which is gauging our success as well. As will be illustrated today, the levels of staffing at the OMMP and OLCC are insufficient to complete the rollout of the marijuana programs in the current time frame. We would recommend both increased staffing and flexibility for the agencies to remedy this. We're very interested in developing caniculture regions similar to the viniculture regions found in the wine industry. We have already begun having meetings to facilitate this process. We are also proposing certifications which have teeth, are enforceable for both regional development and in anticipation of our being able to have our products certified as being organic and sustainably grown and produced. We know that sun-grown cannabis is the highest quality product with the lowest carbon footprint produced in Oregon, and we see added value in being able to certify these facts. The majority of Oregon's cannabis production is sun-grown, and the producers lead an agrarian lifestyle, which is traditional to agriculture here in Oregon. Indeed, Oregon sun-grown is not just synonymous with quality, but it is the backbone of our cannabis industry. We look forward to working with the legislature to create systems which guarantee to Oregon consumers the quality and purity of the products which we provide in the interests of public health and safety. We see that some of the rules passed in the previous legislative sessions and through the rulemaking process are one-size-fits-all solutions. These, unfortunately, cannot be uniformly applied to diverse production situations in our growing cannabis environment. While we will be working with the agencies involved to find better solutions for our sun growers, some issues will require a legislative fix. Fencing is one issue which has been difficult for our sun growers this year, and the current requirements are also found to be wanting by our neighbors in the vineyards and other agricultural endeavors. We have decided to treat cannabis cultivation as an agricultural endeavor in Oregon, and it is time to do just that. Some local jurisdictions have taken great liberties with the allowance the legislature gave them regarding time, place, and manner. While the Oregon Sun-Grown Growers Guild respects the autonomy granted to cities and communities by the state, I must point out that Oregonians voted on a statewide measure regarding marijuana. I cannot think of another instance where a state measure has been so openly disrespected by municipalities within the state, and especially with what appears to be the blessing of the legislators who are in charge of state law. In order for this industry to flourish, there needs to be certainty for the participants. I do not see this being provided currently, and the Oregon Sun-Grown Growers Guild seeks to help the legislature in this process. Moving to another related issue, some of the backdated or retroactive rules have hurt growers and patients, as well as slowing the process of implementation overall. This has created unnecessary expenses as well. As an example, I had 16 patients in 2015. This year, I'm limited to 8. We respectfully request that the legislature allow our rural growers to be able to serve at least the 16 patient, 96 plant count limit that we could previously. Measure 91 stated that implementation was not to adversely affect the OMMP, and decisions such as this have been detrimental. In closing, I would like to request on behalf of the Oregon Sun-Grown Growers Guild that the joint committee which I sit before be continued for at least one more session. We have accomplished much in these last 22 months, and we believe that it will be an easier process to complete the task at hand with this dedicated committee, as opposed to spreading the duties which you have adopted over numerous and varied other subcommittees. This will ensure a better outcome for Oregon and Oregonians. Please retain this needful body and your presence here for at least another season. Thank you.
Thanks very much to all of you for testifying and the hard work you've undertaken in the last 2 years. And that goes to people in the room. You know, we've all gotten to know each other over the course of a couple of years, a lot of us, and your teamwork has been really important. I would like to summarize what I think I heard as the suggestion from Ms. Margolis, so that we can have our friends in the state agencies, when they come up, speak to whether or not you feel like that is something that you could do. I think what you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, that you think it would be helpful to have, I'm choosing, you gave sort of a few different endpoints, but perhaps through the end of November, an extension of the packaging and labeling, new requirements, an extension of the effective date of the new requirements. So you could sell under those requirements, but if you hadn't yet had a chance to implement the new requirements, you could have until end of November for that to be required. And then in terms of testing, 2 pieces, demarcation between product that has been tested under the new regime, because it is an even more vigorous regime, but an allowance of product tested under the prior regime, the current one effective until October 1, that product be allowed perhaps through till the end of November to avoid a gap. And then are you saying also let stores sell through the current stock they have that's been through the existing legal requirements through that same date, which could be, depending on the will of this group, through the end of November or some other date that the will of the group favors. Did that accurately summarize the 3-pronged recommendation that you just made?
Yes, Chair Leininger, members of the committee, there's currently the rules allow for material tested before October 1st to be sold off. So that rule exists already. And I think that you accurately captured both the packaging and labeling, which we are asking for an extension on. It is almost impossible to meet that deadline, as well as the change in the testing requirement date, but by adding on a sticker or notification to accompany it, you're letting the consumer choose between the more rigorously tested material or products that are still tested under the current regime.
Yes, follow up on Chair Burdick.
On your question before I lose my thought.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about a product that is not currently, in terms of testing, that's not currently in the inventory, but future product until we get the lab straightened out. Is that what you're talking about?
Chair Burdick, members of the committee, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay, well, I think that is a very reasonable suggestion. I just want to say that that's what I think. Do you have if I can follow
Yes.
one more, do you have an opinion on how, it's eventually we're going to have enough labs, so we won't have to do that anymore? Do you know what that number might be?
Chair Burdick, members of the committee, I know that other colleagues of mine have been willing to venture a number. I am not willing to venture a number. The more labs we have to help the cannabis business community engage in the rigorous testing, the better. But I don't have a sense of how many that might be. And this proposal provides what I think of as either an off or on ramp to the new testing requirements. It allows the labs to get up to speed, and it allows the industry to slowly transition into that along with those labs who are working very hard to get to the right place.
Thank you. And I have Senator Brzezinski and then Representative Buckley.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Based on what I'm hearing, I think, hopefully the agency will not look only at the 60 days, but I think 90 days. And I'll tell you why, because first it'll be the end of the year. Second, we've actually, in good faith, tried to come and get everything together, but we know that it didn't come together. And I'm concerned that even at 60 days, it's still going to have this transition. It's still going to be ongoing. And so instead of asking the agency to extend this out a second time by going to the end of the year, it's a clear break point, and it would allow for this accommodation. And in answer to the question that I think was asked of Amy, it really, I think it's going to depend on the location of where these testing labs are, as much as how quickly they can come up on board, because of just the stories I'm hearing is that different parts geographically in the state are going to be much more challenged than other parts because they don't have, let's say, readily access to labs in their region or their area. And so it just seems to me that if we're going to ask, and we should be asking the agencies to expand this out, because the last thing we want is to have what, I think some of our speakers today have been gracious saying it could happen. It will happen. I mean, the trains are already heading at each other. And so we need to do what we can safeguard this. So I would encourage us to ask the agency to look at that.
Thank you. That's great. That's really helpful. Representative Buckley.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I'm just curious about the process. Does the agency have the authority to extend the deadline? And do they have to get the rules committee back together in order to extend the deadline? I just don't understand how that process works.
Representative Buckley, co-chairs, members of the committee, because that deadline is not statutory, the agencies could do emergency rulemaking, and they've done it with extending the ODA deadline. They've made some OLCC changes, so they absolutely do have the power to do that, and they can do it rapidly enough to change the impact of October 1 rules.
Thank you.
Did you want to make a comment?
I do, Madam Chair.
Yes,
Thank you.
please.
I would like to add my support for the idea of a 90-day extension. After all, it's not as if the roof would fall in on OLCC if they had to do that emergency rule. And Madam Chair, to address the larger issue of capacity, I think we have erred by making our lab the only place certifications can occur. I think we ought to look very carefully at a rule that would allow any of the 6 licensees who need testing, or any of the labs that wish to be licensed, to choose between those 2 licensing entities that are available, either Oral Lab or the national testing certification process, and have make sure that either one of those is acceptable, at least for the interim term when we're trying to get labs up and running. So I would strongly suggest an interim rule that would allow the licensing for testing labs to be granted based on a certification, either on an Oral Lab basis or on a national basis. I've had this conversation with folks and they tell me that the national certification might be price prohibitive, and that is an argument that simply makes no sense to me because capacity and timing are far more expensive than the cost of certification. So I would strongly suggest that we expect the agency to modify its rules to accept either certification for a 1 year, 2 year period, whatever's feasible, or maybe forever, so that we actually have some competition in certifications, but we get more labs certified in an acceptable manner that provides for safety, purity, and certainty, which is what we're aiming at. The bottleneck we've created at OHA serves to be the number one. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That is helpful. I'd like to make 2 comments. One, I think that this group of legislators would love to hear response from the agencies when you come up to the idea of a 90-day extension on those parameters. It seems like we feel like that would be helpful, and if it's an agency-controlled decision, it would be great to hear if you feel like you can get that done. I want to flag one issue. I heard concern expressed at one point from labs that have gone ahead and gotten the certification to do oral lab certified testing, and there's been a significant capital outlay by those labs. We want to respect that those labs have business interests they're trying to cover. They have expenses they're trying to cover, and so by supporting the idea of allowing, of requiring designation between the products that have been tested under essentially the 2.0 testing vigor and the 1.0 testing vigor, hopefully those labs that hopefully people will choose to obtain product that meets their needs, and it helps labs that have significant capital outlay or producers that have a capital outlay to do the more vigorous testing to recognize some upside for that. So I think that's our intention. We're trying to make sure that everyone has their needs reasonably met in this situation. So agency members, when you come up, if you could speak to that issue, that'd be great. As to the certification question that Senator Ferrioli posed, I just don't know enough about it to be able to. I generally think you present really smart ideas, but I would say that at this moment I don't know enough about the interchangeability of those 2 things, but I would sure like to learn more. Use your name.
Madam Chair, that's why we need a cannabis commission in Oregon.
All right then. Well, thank you. Okay, thank you, industry friends and colleagues, for being here. Were there no other questions on that? All right, so now I would like to invite OLCC to come to the front and speak to us. And as you settle in, I want to thank you for the really tremendous work your team has done. And it's been hard, and you've had to work really hard, but I think you hear throughout our community a lot of appreciation for the nimbleness and adaptability and hard work that you've undertaken. So even though we've just foisted several questions on you that you may not have anticipated, we're doing it with appreciation for your great work. So welcome. Please start and state your name for the record.
Madam Co-Chair, members of the committee, I'm Will Bigland. I'm the Senior Director at the OLCC.
Committee members, I'm Janet Hipsman, Director of Licensing.
Madam Co-Chair, my name is Nathan Rooks, Senior Policy Analyst for recreational marijuana.
Thank you.
So I think I'll start. Based on the conversation we just had, a little surprising, not totally surprising, but it's hard for me to actually respond directly, to be honest with you. This is a commission decision. I think the commission has shown the flexibility and nimbleness that we want to do the right things to make this industry successful. I have no doubt that based on this conversation, that we can take these issues back to the commission and our leadership to have this discussion with you. There's lots of people involved with this, the industry, OHA, us, to potentially make changes in our rules. It will take a little change to do some of the things we're talking about. We're responsible for the packaging and labeling, really the packaging. The testing side would be OHA, the way I understand it. But I'm not trying to pass the buck, but as I sit here today and just heard that, I'm more than willing, and I think it's appropriate to take it back to the commission. We'll have to move quickly. through temporary rulemaking process, the way I understand it. And obviously October 1st is coming up very quickly. And so, you know, it's Friday afternoon, so I'm sure Monday we would get together and figure out a plan and communicate back with you our strategy from that point forward. And I'm free to answer any questions around that.
Yes, please.
Yeah, you mentioned that OHA is involved in the testing, but it's OLCC that determines, that would be determinative of whether a product can enter the OLCC dispensaries with labeling and a less rigorous testing. Isn't that correct?
If I, Co-Chair, if I understand the question, yes, that is correct.
Okay, I just want to make that clear that this really is being recorded.
Right. And then the other thing that, I'm not sure where we're going to go because we got a presentation set. Some of the concerns that the industry had are actually in our presentation that I think, not totally, but some of the things might answer some of your questions as we go through it as far as where we are, the changes we've made recently to temporary rules because we understand there's a bottleneck. We understand we need to get retailers online. We've made decisions to allow the medical product come into the recreational system early. The early start, although has been ingenious and it was a great system, we got very nervous as the industry did as we went down this path. If we waited till December 31st before we switched over, we couldn't keep up. So we were going to have a big log jam. We were going to lose tax revenue. So what you'll hear today from us is a plan in place to actually bring the medical product over and kind of parallel what OHA is doing today to allow dispensaries to sell out of that medical product all the way until March 1st. I think there's a deadline of December 31st now. We were planning on extending that out. Reason being is one, to sell the product, and then two, with the legislative session coming up next biennium, we would actually have some information on this industry and where we stand today, so we could have a conversation with you about here we are today, what changes do we need to make going forward. So.
Great. I think Senator Brzezinski had a comment, but I want to know that we still really want to hear your presentation and appreciate the adaptiveness that you've already built into the presentation, notwithstanding the fact that we just asked you to take something back to the commissioners. Senator Brzezinski.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. So, well, I appreciate your understanding how quick this needs to be done. I hope that everyone that's hearing this right now is taking the steps to maybe get the ball moving forward. Today, getting notices out to your commission that there more than likely will be an emergency meeting. It's going to need to be done because come next Friday, it's got to be in place. Just because I don't see this happening over the following weekend.
Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Senator, absolutely. You know, I can't promise any outcome here, but I can absolutely guarantee that after the meeting today, we'll make sure that we get the communication out and we'll figure out a battle plan to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, please go ahead with the additional rate.
I don't know where to start now. Well, just in general, if we forget about what we just talked about, you know, we've been, you know, the group up here today, Nathan's really been our policy, and Danica and I have been the implementer. So we're really focused on our implementation plan and where we stood today. So you'll see the challenges we've had, what the applications actually look like today, some of the rule changes that I just mentioned, and where we see this industry as far as going forward. I can tell you from our perspective, although there are challenges, and we've mentioned a lot of them right now, is we think we're ready, you know, as far as trying to get this thing up and running by the date certain by December 31st. We've made a lot of changes in our rules, especially for retail, to get retail up and running. As you know, all our different license types touch each other. So if they're not all connected, we don't have an industry. Right now, we've got growers that have, you'll see, produced marijuana, we've harvested marijuana, we have marijuana in our CTS system. There's nowhere for it to go. You know, and if we didn't get retail up and moving quicker, we were going to have a big problem. So fundamentally, that was the reason we changed some of the processes. We put in some temporary rules to help us along in those avenues. So we're ready. We owe it to the businesses that trusted us to spend their money to get a license. We owe it to them to get this industry up and going. We've been as nimble as we can be. We've been listening, and hopefully we'll get there, and we're confident we can. So with that, I think I'll pass it to Danica, and she can talk about more of the details of what we've done. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair and Committee Member. What we've been saying from the beginning is we're going to license along the supply chain, and that strategy hasn't changed. The one thing that we did learn earlier this year is that the outdoor producers were a very complex license type. Every site was very unique, and it certainly took us a lot longer than I think anybody anticipated to get those licensed. But we felt it was important to continue to focus on that particular subset of the applicants for a longer period of time, because it really was the source of most of the product for the rest of the supply chain. We have now moved on through, we are processing licenses in every license type, but even as the time has gone on, we still see kind of the same challenges that we saw earlier this year. A lot of challenges with incomplete applications, needing to get more information from applicants in order to complete the process. And the second biggest one probably being applicants' inability to get site construction completed. Still continue to hear information from applicants that they're having trouble getting contractors to come out, finish installations, finish security installations so that we can actually do the inspections. One of our biggest concerns has been, can we get enough licenses in each license type to put the entire market together? As you can see here, we do view that every license type really feeds the other, and it's really impossible to put an entire market together unless you have all the pieces there and have enough of them for the entire supply chain to work. Our strategy to deal with some of these challenges is really about threefold. The rule development being probably the first and foremost. One of the things we really did this summer was take a look at our security rules and really streamline them. Also provide some additional options in rule to meet some of the security requirements so that we could do away with a lot of the waivers that was time consuming and burdensome for our staff and for the industry. So we worked really hard to make sure that that was an easier thing to meet. One of the things I'll just note for this committee in particular, we are working on removing the requirement that solid fencing be in place. That should go into effect in December of this year. Our staffing strategy has stayed the same. It's really an all hands on deck approach. We do have limited staffing. We've made the best of it. We've had employees working in our class, managers, directors, anybody that's trained up to take license applications and process them. We have them do it. Probably the biggest change that we've made, particularly over the last month to 6 weeks, has been some of our licensing processes, and particularly for the retailers, we actually have moved very rapidly on those, frankly moving the inspection to the forefront. Many of these, especially if they're existing dispensaries, they meet the vast majority of our security requirements already. We are offering automatic 90-day waivers for certain security requirements, and we're finding we're actually not even having to issue those because people just meet them de facto. I heard Mr. Johnson's request for 6 months. It's certainly something we could look at extending that, particularly if people are having difficulty complying within that first 90 days. But that's a step we already put in place, is to essentially grant an automatic waiver of certain things to give them more time. These are the application stacks that we had just as of Monday. They change every day. They change rapidly even today. What I want to just point out for the committee is the ready to review category. That's really our backlog. That's where we're at, of ones that they're ready to be processed by an investigator, but we haven't been able to get to them. We've been working hard to drop that number. As of today, it's actually only 133. So it's 133 applications that are waiting for that investigator assignment. On Wednesday, we were able to assign out every single retailer statewide that had it set, submitted, and approved logs. So every single one of them, as of Wednesday, had an investigator that's working with them to get them licensed. The other thing that has dramatically changed here is the number of labs. We actually have 4 that are approved. 4 that are active, another one that's approved, and another one that will be approved on Monday. So by Monday, it should be a total of 6 labs that are up and operational. It's been a crazy time at the commission, but we were able to kind of pull together some processing timeframes, because I think that's been a concern both on our end and the industry of where we're at. There's really 2 buckets to licensing: the submission to assignment to an investigator, and from assignment to investigator to approval. The first one really isn't something that's in the applicant's control. That's really our staffing levels and our ability to process the applications. And I think, as you can see here, from January to March, we were taking a considerably longer time. I think that's indicative of the difficulties we had with the complexity of the outdoor grows, and the number of applications that we received, and just our own learning processes of figuring out how the best way to do this is for the industry and for ourselves. Since that time frame from May to August, though, we've dropped that actually down to 25 days. So that from 25 days of submission with an approved lux to assignment is an average of 25 days. The second bucket, from assignment to an investigator to approval, that's really one where the applicants are in much more control. And frankly, they're in the driver's seat. They really tell us when do we want to be licensed, and then we'll make that happen. It really is a matter of just getting their security in place, getting their background checks done, and particularly with the processors and retailers, we've really stripped back a lot of the other extraneous requirements. We're actually scheduling inspections right at the forefront so that applicants are missing information. We can just take those forms with us and help them fill it out. And it's actually been pretty successful in moving people forward. As Will mentioned, we went to temporary rulemaking last Friday to put a couple of rules in place. A lot of this came from feedback from the industry. We were looking at the processors and retailers and asking what can we do to help get you into the market faster. The biggest one being that it's going to be difficult to go back and have all products that they had existing packaged, tested, and labeled to all the new standards. So the temporary rule we put in place would allow them to take any inventory the October 1 and transfer it in without having it be retested to the new standards. The labeling, they will have to have it labeled to OLC standards, but they can use a generic label that they could just put over the top of it. And for the packaging, they are not required to repackage it as long as it's sold in an approved exit bag. Same thing for the processors. We discovered our rules were only allowing registered processors to transfer product in. There are no registered processors, there's only approved applicant processors, so we just revised our rules to allow more of the medical processors to transfer product in. We continued our interagency coordination, particularly as we've gotten into the processors and retailers. It's gotten a lot more heavy in terms of coordination we need with OHA. We've also started coordinating more with the Oregon State Police to deal with some of the public safety issues that have been occurring statewide and figure out some strategies in which we can give law enforcement around the state the information they need, such as transport manifests or understanding who are licensed grows and who are not, and any other public safety information they need. Since we last reported to you too, we also started the worker permit process. It went live on July 6th. We weren't able to, because of the system issues, actually start issuing permits until September 8th. We have a little over 3,000 applications as of just this week. We've approved approximately 1,000, and that actual number has actually gone up since we pulled these stats together, so about a third of them since September 8th. We do anticipate that number is going to grow significantly in terms of the total number of them, but our expectation is we'll clear our backlog by December 31st. And finally, just a quick update on the cannabis tracking system. It's been functional. Metric has been a great partner both for the agency and for the industry, providing a lot of training both internally and to the industry so they can know how to use the system. It's also showing us a lot of data of what's out there. The total wet weight that's been harvested so far is actually 30,000 pounds as of today, and this is not including practically any outdoor grows. And the total finished dry weight is 22,750. With that, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two quick questions. On the application stats slide that you gave us, on the need lux category, am I correct in understanding that everything else about the application has been satisfied and you're just waiting for the lux?
Representative Helm, not necessarily. We cannot assign it to an investigator until it has received a lux. We have had staff that are going through a lot of those applications though and looking for other missing information and following up with the applicant so they can get that into place. That number is actually 258 as of now. That actually includes any that are also in an opt-out jurisdiction that are going to be having to go to a vote in November. We just kind of kept it in that bucket because they can't get a lux right now, but we're trying to get them ready that if they do get one, that we can move them pretty fast.
One follow-up.
Yes, please.
If I missed this, I apologize. Have you had to deny any applications, and if so, how many?
As of right now, we've only had to propose denial on 2 applications.
Any other comments for this panel? We do have a lot of additional people willing to hear from. Well, I just want to thank you again, and I want to thank all of your colleagues who have been working together so diligently. You've done some great work, and I hope you feel proud and appreciated in that, even as we work together to try to continue making headway. Great, thank you. All right, next I would like to call up our colleagues from the Oregon Health Authority. And And then after that, we've got the Oregon Department of Agriculture and the Department of Revenue. And a few panels after that. So we're looking at a pretty tight timeline, but this is, of course, really important information. So we're delighted that you're here. And we invite you to proceed in whatever order makes most sense. State your name for the record, and we'll get rolling.
Sorry, just bringing up technology. My name is Jerry High. I'm the administrator for the Center for Health Protection. Andre apologizes he couldn't be here, but he had a scheduled vacation day, so I'm sitting in for Andre.
Okay.
Chair Leininger and Chair Burdick, members of the committee. My name is Kati Mosley. I'm a health promotion strategist with the Public Health Division of the Oregon Health Authority.
So I'll get started. Co-chairs,
Yes, please.
co-chairs and committee members, I'm glad to be here. Like I said, my name is Jerry High, and we're going to provide an update on the Oregon medical marijuana update. I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead. I think looking at your slide, it looks like you're going to address exactly the kind of things we were excited to hear about.
So I'll start off first addressing the proposal that I just heard about the 90-day extension. I think OLCC partners are right. We'll work with them and coordinate with them and make that happen. We've already had some initial discussions with Department of Justice. We think that's okay. That's an okay date, so we'll proceed with that, and we'll try to make it happen. We'll also coordinate with industry, I think, to make all these rules changes line up. One thing that's taught us in the past 22 months is to be flexible in this industry startup. So with that, we're going to cover a little bit about ORLAP accreditation, the October 1 rules, or whatever date the October becomes, and then some program stats. So the ORLAP stands for Oregon Environmental Lab Accreditation Program. To be clear, OHA does the accreditation, and the labs actually do the product testing for those listed on the slide. So far, we've had 37 labs apply for accreditation. We've had 17 accreditation assessments scheduled for the October 1st date, and as of Wednesday of this week, we had 10 labs accredited. And ORLAP has taken a leadership role, and OHA has worked closely to review the options and develop an assessment schedule to meet the demands of the pending certification. As this is a startup part of the industry, there have been some bumps in the road. But I think we've overcome those, and now we have the 10 labs accredited to help the industry meet the required capacity. With the additional time, that number will increase to handle that capacity. So here's the regulatory compliance stage, which after the talk today will likely change. So this slide's out of date. Like our OLCC partners indicated, there was an emergency rule passed last Friday, so I won't cover that piece. And a lot of these comments that I had in this slide probably will be overcome by events now, so I'll move on. So October 1st, effective date, that may change. All packaging must go through OLCC and OHA pre-approval process or must be in pre-approved packages. On or about October 1st, as I prepared this, marijuana items received or transferred by dispensary must meet the concentration, serving size, and labeling packaging requirements. So now you can change that date to December 31st, what I heard this morning, and it works out with the rules. And then products transferred prior to that date that were not sampled and tested according to the rules, like our OLCC partners indicated, will have a label that says does not meet the new testing requirements. And that's to allow the product to get through the system and not create the bottleneck. So let's go on to some stats. Currently, we have 129 processing sites that have submitted complete applications and are listed on the OMP website in order to continue processing until full review and inspection before the January 1st, 2017 date. Application volume changes. We're no longer in registered out-of-state applicants. Marijuana was legalized, as you know, in July of 2015, and then early retail sales began at dispensaries on October 2015. You see a slight dip in the number of applications. I won't make assumptions about why or how that's going to look. We'll just have to look at the numbers as they come in. You'll see an increase in the processing time period. Applications are always cyclical, as you can see from the graph. There's up and downs. You can see the overall trend is up. And so there'll always be some periods of longer processing times based on that cyclical nature of the business. Additionally, the volume has increased over the years and staffing has remained constant. Some of the tactics that we've used is hire temporary staff to assist. We are developing a patient online application system targeted to be completed at the end of December. That'll help with that. And then we've also reallocated positions within the program to address staffing needs, as well as some temps during those peak periods. But it has been hard to keep up with some of those people. Dispensaries, March of 2014, the program was implemented. The number of open dispensaries has increased from November of 2015 at 317 to August 2016 this year, 422, so about an increase of about 100. Processing full application review has started, and on-site inspections begin in September this month. Reporting for growers, processors, and dispensaries began in June 2016. The percent of growers reported is based upon the growers that are required to report. Reporting requirements for growers do not apply to patients growing for themselves at their residence and not transferring usable marijuana to a dispensary or processing facility. Compliance has increased each month, and for growers of the 10,500 growers that have registered accounts, of those 84% have complied with the requirements. So we see that increasing every month. We do provide manual reporting alternative for growers, and then we're going to provide an alternate method for dispensary reporting. They can enter an online account and make that happen. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there any other process changes that might help with the logjam as labs are given their way? Do you set the rules on the size of the batch that's tested? Could that size be increased? Would that help with the logjam?
So there's a lot of work being done on that sampling procedure and that sample size. A lot of the lab rules that they have to have a certain amount to make that happen, so they can conduct all the different tests. So they're looking at all those, and I think with the additional time and the additional 3 months, I think that probably we'll have in the 30s the number of labs that'll be able to test.
Thank you.
Great, Senator,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Have you formed some idea of how many labs are needed to serve the entire industry?
I couldn't venture a guess. We've had some initial talks, but I think this is such a new industry that we just don't know what that number is. Typically, from previous experience with new industries and these testings, there's going to be lots of different labs that start out. That number will likely go down and consolidate, but it's too new to venture a guess.
Well, I'm sure I like some back of the envelope math. If you've got 22,000 pounds of product coming toward 10 labs, a simple back of the envelope would tell me that you've got, 2,200 pounds per laboratory. The batch size matters. I mean, you can reduce this to an equation, and I'd like to see it, but I want to get some idea.
I'll take that back and we'll be back.
And Madam Chair, follow up?
Yes, please.
There's a clear statistical migration from medical marijuana dispensaries to recreational. So, you've also got 68,000 cardholders. And the question, again, would be, I'd like an estimate of how many dispensaries they're going to be available to serve those 68,000 patients and how they'll be distributed geographically. So if you could provide that information, I think that would give me an idea of whether or not we're literally concentrating the medical demand in a set of dispensaries that's really not going to be large enough or well distributed enough to meet those demands.
Yeah, I'll take those two questions back to
Thank you.
our program.
Yes, I have Rep. Wilson and then Co-Chair Burdick, please.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. A question for you about the geography of the labs. What are we looking at here? You mentioned you've got 10 labs approved. Where are they?
So there's one in Bend, and most of them are on the I-5 corridor. So Hood River, several Portland, Tigard, Bend, 2 Eugenes, Newport, and Clackamas are the range of
Nothing in Josephine, Jackson?
Not yet.
Okay, thank you.
Co-Chair Burdick, please.
Thank you. On your previous slide, I don't know if you did on the people reporting. I want to make sure I understand what, sorry about that. Yeah, there we go. So you say 40% were reporting in June and 44%. What does that mean for the growers?
So the number, as we bring the growers on, we're doing inventory, so that's the number that are reporting the inventory.
And then what about the other 60%? What are they doing?
So we're working with them so they get into the reporting system. So it's a ramp-up process.
Okay, so it's not a non-compliance, it's a ramp-up?
It's a ramp-up process.
Okay, and are your enforcement people going out and looking at these properties?
Yes.
And I have a question.
One follow-up, I forgot. On the card holders, I'd like to see a chart of how many of the card holders have growers and how many are getting their product from dispensaries, so we can get a sense of how that population is shifting.
So let me ask a clarifying question. So card holders compared to, again?
Well, how the card holders are breaking down. In other words, do they have growers, do they have growers, are they using dispensaries, are they growing their own? It'd be very interesting to see if there's any changes over the, over the time that we've been altering this program.
Okay, well, I'll take that question back and we'll try to feather that out for you, Simon.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work. I know this is hard, and I know that the people on your team and your agency have been in a hard spot. So thank you for being the people who are before us today and for working hard to get us to the implementation of the laws that we passed in the last 2 years. I have a question about the labs that have been certified. How many of the labs that have been certified are approved to do all the categories of testing that are required under the statute? I've heard some concern that a lot are not approved to do all of the categories of testing required.
So it appears from the list I have 2 out of the 10 can do all. And that's part of my comment is, there might be several labs that do it and they might consolidate over time.
So, thank you, that's helpful. And I think what that helps signal is because when I heard 10, I thought, oh, does that mean that there isn't really a bottleneck? But there is a bottleneck if there are a whole bunch of parameters for which we need to test. And so far, only a very small number who are approved to test for all parameters. So thank you for having that number on hand. The other question I have has to do with the duration for processing patient card renewals. I know we passed a provision in one of our bills last session that gives patients the opportunity to submit their sort of proof of application for renewal in lieu of a current card. But I think both growers and patients are struggling to make sure that they're in compliance, and when renewals don't happen within that window of time, that both growers and patients end up in a tough spot. So can you speak to the issue of the backlog or duration of renewal of patient cards and what you're doing to try to manage that?
I can have my colleague in the back answer that. I'm not familiar enough with that application process. Carol?
The lifeline is coming.
Thank you. Thank you. you welcome, if you could state your name for the record and speak to that.
Madam Chair, Member and Committee, I'm Carol Yan. I'm the Analysis Unit Manager for the program. Kind of your question a little twofold on the backlog. Are you wanting more on the reporting compliance where people are trying to comply? Is that the question, or is it just the backlog itself?
Well, it's my understanding. Thank you for asking that clarifying question. My understanding is that the duration of processing time for those patient cards is causing trouble on two fronts. It's causing trouble for patients who need medicine and whose sort of proof of application no longer suffices, but it's also providing a problem for growing businesses that want to show that they have the appropriate number of cards and they don't have that, or they can't report if they don't have a current card, and so they can't even give you the information that you need. So it sounds like a big problem.
Yeah,
and I'm wondering how you're trying to solve it.
We're working very diligently within the program to address the backlog. So some of it, as we said earlier, is cyclical. So we definitely have times of the year that there are more applications to process. We do have some additional mandates that have been on. Even adding the receipt has added additional workload to the same staff. So we've brought some temporary employees in to help. We've hired more temporary employees to address it. We have assigned some other staff, and we are actually working Saturdays. I come in one Saturday a month, and we work overtime, and the other manager does as well with our staff. So it is something that we consider a very high priority, and we're trying to get that back down to a more manageable level. On the cyclical part of it, we have met that peak. So on that part, we should start being able to come back down. So that's a good thing. But I do know that it makes a burden on our patients, so we definitely are working on that. On the reporting part, we're working with the growers and our patients that need to report, and we understand it's not anything they have control over. It's the way the system is set up and the way that the program was devised is you can't report if it's not in the system. That is kind of, it's the button that gets clicked is when the card is generated. And we've been working with our growers and have told them, you have no control, and that's fine, we'll start reporting. They're still covered as long as an application has been received by the medical marijuana program. Both the grower and the patient is covered legally. So if there was ever an issue with law enforcement, we have the system set up in place where our law enforcement can call in and they can verify that information as well.
That's a really helpful statement to hear, because I know that people have been worried about being vulnerable to to prosecution for.
Yes, exactly.
So, thanks, Senator Farrell.
It's an issue, ma'am, that I brought up at every one of our meetings. Amazon Prime offers CBD oil from home delivery in any concentration that you wish to purchase it. It's unregulated in all 50 states if the CBD is derived from hemp. Oregon has a system of regulatory structure, so if people are looking at CBD as a pain management tool, they have to get an OMMD card and purchase that or have it produced by a licensed purveyor or grower. That seems incongruous, and I'd like to have somebody in the OHA system explain, is there a difference between CBD oil produced from hemp and CBD oil produced from cannabis? And if not, why are we still regulating CBD products if it's available online in all 50 states if it's hemp-derived? So,
that's when we'll take off the analysis. That one's not in my
Senator, please have it.
Back to testing labs. We had kind of started with the assumption that there's national standards for testing labs, and this should be a relatively easy thing to accomplish. So I guess what I would like would be the tests that you think are necessary that aren't already in a national standard that are requiring this kind of more version of testing compliance. Yeah, I don't expect the answer to that right now, but I think that would be helpful for the committee to know what it is that isn't I mean, because we did assume that we could get some nationalized standards, and because all sorts of things are tested in this country, and we aren't really dealing with something that unique here, so.
Senator Lachey, would you? Okay, thank you very much. Are you also presenting?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And recognizing we have quite a number of additional people lined up, but your piece here is extremely important. So.
Thank you. And Chairman, I will also give you the short version.
Thank you.
I am happy to be here today. You have my presentation if you would like to dive in more detail. I'm happy to be here today to talk to you about the state's review marijuana use prevention campaign. You all may recall, I certainly do, I started sweating at the end of the last session when you passed House Bill 4014 and gave the health authority responsibility to design, implement, and evaluate this campaign. As I said, there's more detail in my presentation. I wanted to say a few things about the campaign, though, that I think are important to understanding the context, the public health context in which we've done this work. We grounded this campaign in messages that were reviewed by the Retail Marijuana Scientific Advisory Committee, which was a committee convened last fall by the Oregon Health Authority. And we conducted extensive focus group research with 14 to 20-year-olds in Oregon from different parts of Oregon and also from different racial, ethnic, and language groups within Oregon to learn what messages, messengers, and means of delivery for this campaign would work best for them. I think in the end, we reached about 260 youth. We spoke with about 260 youth and young adults. We have been implementing the campaign since the end of June. Initial campaign data indicate that the intended audience is seeing the campaign. We are delivering the messages largely through digital advertising, and so that includes things like streaming radio, streaming video, banner, and pop-up ads. And what this does is it really allows us to reach the target audience with a high degree of accuracy, but it also means that if you are not a youth or a young adult, or if you don't frequent online spaces where youth and young adults frequent, you are not likely to see the campaign online. I will let you reflect on your own internet habits if you have some. And finally, importantly, the bill that you all championed through required us to evaluate the campaign, which I actually personally wonkily find very exciting. So we've successfully collected data from youth, young adults, and parents prior to the campaign launch. So we have our baseline data. And right now we are finalizing the data collection tools for the midterm evaluation of the campaign, which will take place this fall in order for us to successfully report to you by January 1st, as the statute requires. I look forward to continuing to keep you up to date on the progress of this, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Questions for our presenters?
Madam Chair, this sounded interesting, that Bend is rural. That's not my definition.
That's really great. Thank you for doing this work, and I see this as work that falls within the core competence of OHA, and you've done a really nice job both addressing the fact that we have limited time right now, but giving us more information on the slides, and most of all, undertaking really important work. So thank you. Any other questions for the panel? Thank you all very much for being here today, and we look forward to hearing back on the issues that you're going to be researching and coming back in. Okay, so now we have speakers from the Oregon Department of Agriculture and the Department of Revenue, and we look forward to having you come up. It would be great if we can have this presentation in a total of about 15 minutes rather than the 20 for which we had originally budgeted, so we can make sure to get through everything.
All right, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Deanna Mack with Department of Revenue, and I put together a few slides for you today. Kind of moves on from where we presented in May. I wanted to let you know the first couple slides are about the receipts. I'm presenting them a little bit differently than I did in the last month or in May. You'll see that there are February receipts. Those are for January tax collections. They're not required to be deposited until the next month. So these are aligning now with our financial statement. So there's nothing different in there other than the way I'm presenting them. The next slide, your July and August receipts. You'll note that in June 2nd, you allowed and expanded the sales to edibles, topicals, receptacles, so the vaping, concentrates, that kind of thing. So you'll see there's a little bit of an increase in receipts for the month of August, not so much between in June and July, which kind of surprised me a little bit. But we are not actually seeing, other states told us that the increase in the sales would be from edibles, and we're finding it's more the concentrates than the vaping. It could be because the price per item is more expensive, so it makes up a little bit more of the tax. It is being remitted net of the 2% administration fee that costs for them to do this, to collect and remit. So far for this fiscal year, you've got about $12.8 million. One quick note about the cash issue, you may or may not be aware, on August 11th, the DEA issued a decision saying they were not going to remove marijuana from the Controlled Substances Act from Schedule 1 because there wasn't enough research to say that it had a medical value, official research apparently. So that leads us to believe that the first step that the federal government will do is to move marijuana down for medical purposes, which still doesn't help us for the recreational cash issue. For financial institutions. As long as it is on the Controlled Substances Act at all, it's still an issue for cash. So our long-term goal of dealing with that for the next 5 to 10 years was a good idea, investing in that, because if you think it will be there that long. The federal government could still act, however, and provide specific guidance for financial institutions that it's not a violation of their banking laws if they were so to choose to do that. We are still watching for that action to occur. So as I just kind of covered this slide for you already. Once we process third quarter returns, right, we only have a couple of quarter returns. We'll have a full quarter to do some real comparisons. But right now we just have partial return data for where products were available for both just the early start flower, bud, that kind of stuff, and then the expanded edibles and those kinds of things. So it's still a little too early to tell what the amounts are. Just a reminder that the deposits are due monthly, returns are due quarterly. We've had a little bit of confusion in the industry, I guess you could say. Some folks didn't realize that there was still a return filing requirement, that the deposits weren't enough. We do believe we have about a 95% compliance rate in the deposits every month, but we had about a 50% compliance rate in the number of returns that were filed that needed to be to reconcile those and to show the 2% net remittance fee. We are working on filing enforcement efforts with folks to educate them, bring them in. So far for the first quarter, we've got about 80% of those in the system. I think it's just people are confused. It's a new process. It's very much mirroring our payroll process where we have monthly deposits for most businesses and then quarterly filing return filing requirement. So as you can see, we did start our filing enforcement. We did issue some failure to file assessments for first quarter. We have already sent requests to file notices for second quarter, and we're getting ready to send failure to file assessments for second quarter here this next month. We still have quite a bit of outreach efforts that we've been doing so that we can get people into the system. It has remained a priority for us, particularly because the filing compliance has been so low. We are working with the OHA and the medical marijuana dispensary list to try and identify them. We call folks first, but if we can't reach them by phone, we send an agent out to talk to them and inform them of their obligations. We also talk to them about their errors. We call them directly. It's a small group of taxpayers we're dealing with here, so we can give a little bit more personal attention to them than we can for some of our others. So we also have a lot of information about the tax filing obligations in the Marijuana Business Readiness Guide that OLCC is publishing with our partner agencies, and OLCC is also providing tax literature. So we have a dedicated phone line, that kind of stuff. So outreach has been definitely a priority for us to educate these folks. We have listservs, we have emails, lists that we're sending folks to. We're sending informational letters
we're really trying to get that compliance rate in there so you guys can have some data about the types of products that are being sold. That's the information that comes in on the quarterly return as opposed to monthly deposits. The deposits are just the money that is owed. The return will show you the information about whether it's receptacles, concentrates, extracts, bud flour, that kind of stuff. Return processing for the Early Start program for dispensaries is a paper filing process. We are with licensed retailers, we're going to be offering online electronic filing through our Revenue Online portal with our new computer system. Right now it's in design and testing stage, but it's going to be a substantially better process. It will reduce a lot of our manual work currently, and it'll be more user-friendly for the licensed retailers to just go online and actually file their return that way rather than have to mail it to us. There is going to be, this is where one of our focus areas too, because you have to overlap for the next 3 months in October, November, December between Early Start and retail sales. There could be some businesses that are doing both. There's different tax rates for both. Remember the tax rate, the 25% tax rate ends on December 31st, 2016, and it drops in licensed, anyone selling licensed stores, it's going to be a 17% rate. So there will be some overlap. Some people will be selling at 17%, some people will be selling at 25%. So we're anticipating there'll be some confusion there, and we're trying to make sure people are educated on what those processes are. We are working with local governments. You folks amended our statute 305-620 to allow the department to administer the local tax for marijuana if local governments approach us. We are currently working with stakeholders on an intergovernmental agreement. The idea is that we will have a single standard agreement that will, in the interest of keeping administrative costs low. And we're working, I believe, with the League of Oregon Cities. We're going to be meeting with them in the next couple of weeks to kind of fine tune that. Again, these slides here are just reminder slides. I don't need to go through them. It's just a distribution schedule, how you changed it between pre-2017 and post-July 1, 2017. And then these are a list of the administrative rules that we have going. I presented these in May as well. Some of them were temporary at that time, and now they've become permanent. You'll see this one's effective. This list is effective July 1. And that's basically the remainder of the presentation as well as a chart. I'm trying to get through that pretty quick for you. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
Do we have any questions right now? Okay, thank you very much. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Co-Chair Langer for the record, Lauren Henderson. I'm the Assistant Director of the Department of Ag. I wanted to update you on some items that I've mentioned before to you, and then I have a surprise new item that I'll say to last. The first and foremost piece of information, which I think is exciting news, is I talked to you before that our agency is following our partner agencies, OLCC and OHA, and because of that, we have issued our first few food safety licenses, and that's good news. We'll do that as they get through those other processes and try to keep up as best we can. But the fact that we've already issued some and have our staff out trying to be proactive to make sure that when the folks need to get licensed, they've done all the things they need to do. We're expecting a big batch in the next few months, and we'll do our best to keep up. And hopefully, if you invite me back at your next meeting, I'll be able to tell you we've licensed in the hundreds, I hope. So that's the first thing. The second thing, we pride ourselves on education and outreach. Our staff are working really hard to provide materials to folks, both in the food safety area, pesticide area, egg water quality, materials for folks so that they know what to expect related to our agency and some of the requirements, and that work is ongoing. We have had a few products that we have had to put stop sales on. Those products have been mislabeled in the pesticide area. We've worked hard with the state of Washington. I think we're up to about 15. That's important because if they're mislabeled, someone or a grower, it doesn't matter that it's just cannabis, it could be any grower, would be using a product that they think is one thing, and if it's not labeled correctly, it could be another, which ultimately could mean you have things that do not pass the required test. And so we don't want that to happen, and we've been successful on many of those stop sales. That's an ongoing process, and we're glad we have Washington and Colorado to assist with that. We have had some pesticide complaints, drift use. Those are ongoing, just like our normal work. I think we're up to 8 or so, and so that work is ongoing. And the last item is, if it's not hard enough that all of us try to work through our programs to make this industry work efficiently for the growers as well as everyone else, we have a little beetle, it's a Japanese beetle, that has decided to take a hold. It's a non-native insect to Oregon. Our staff, our insect staff, have found a very large population in the Portland area. Many of you might remember we had a gypsy moth eradication effort in Portland. This beetle likes hops, nursery products, roses, and cannabis, and it will be just because of the nature of that. I think there's 300 plant species, and so we don't want that to get established here. Our staff are working very hard to identify the source. I don't think they quite know. I've heard it may have come from someone who maybe moved in with bringing live plants. They may have been in the dirt before they emerged to be adults. And so I would expect you will see us again during the session with maybe an emergency board ask for funding. Federal funds are not available for this. We've had small populations in Oregon before, but have always been able to keep them back. The fact that we have found 300 in one area, other states' experiences with this is that we would find 5,000 to 10,000 next year. And so this is not a simple, it's going to go away tomorrow eradication project. It could be over 5 years, but getting ahead of it will certainly help everyone. So that's something I've not talked to you about before, but it certainly could affect this industry, and of course we don't want that. So.
Any questions? Well, that was some surprise finish for the Department of Agriculture. Thank you for the heads up on that. I'm sorry that you had that bit of news. But for both your agencies, we've heard a lot of great things about your work, and I think you've engendered a lot of trust among stakeholders. So thank your staffs, please, and appreciate your testimony today. All right. Now we have a local update. We would like to invite Rob Bovett and Scott Winkles to come forward and talk to us about the perspective of local jurisdictions. Thank you for being here. Am I right, Mr. Bovett, that perhaps your CSA and MIP law update is going to be a little briefer than we budgeted for? So
I'll be short on
that. Oh, that's great. So I think we're still on track to get finished by 2 p.m. and we're really happy that you're here.
What do you mean? We are.
All right. Representative Olson is particularly happy.
And I'm sure I'm sad. For the record, Scott Winkles representing the League of Oregon Cities. I will refer to this as efficiently as I can. On the topic of bans and moratorium, currently we have 50 local governments that have referred a ban for their voters for referral that will be up in November. And there are 53 jurisdictions in the state. That's the total list includes the cities and the counties. Predominantly, that's going to be cities. Non-voter referrals, meaning that they have enacted a ban and have notified OLCC that they intend to. Most cities, we haven't compiled a comprehensive list, but my sense of it is that most cities that are allowing it house shops are referring a tax, I think. And we have some cities that have a ban on the ballot and a tax on the ballot asking their voters, what do you want? Do you want this? Do you want to tax it? And so that's taking place, and we will have as we do after every election, we will have a comprehensive report that will be available shortly afterwards. So we'll have a list of everybody who's all the jurisdictions that have had something on the ballot and how that came out. Additionally, on the subject of the local tax, we are in negotiations with the Department of Revenue on the intergovernmental agreement to allow for them to collect the local tax. We feel that it's an efficiency issue for the industry. It's efficiency for us. There are some safety issues given the cash nature of the business, and we expect those negotiations are productive. There are a couple more things we need to work out. We fully anticipate having a workable agreement in time for the tax to be instituted and collected. In the terms of Continuing on the vein of financing, the league is interested in the conversation on lifting the preemption on how marijuana share is spent under Measure 91, the requirement that any shared revenue be spent on costs related to the act. What we have found in touring, particularly in rural Oregon, is that there are jurisdictions that do have an interest in allowing, but what they're really looking for is some way to suppress sewer and water rates. And so, for instance, Hines and Huntington have allowed, and what they are looking for is some way to increase revenue for utility purposes. And so the goal is to incentivize local governments to allow. That would be helpful in one way to do that, is to allow them to spend the money as they do the liquor revenue, which has no audit requirements or requirements that be spent in a certain way. We also believe that it'd be very difficult to produce a clean audit under the current requirement, because you have to track each dollar that goes to the system and demonstrate that it was spent in relation to a cost associated with the act. Again, liquor revenue is several times marijuana revenue, and it's not a impact requirement, isn't attached to OLCC share revenue. So we would have a want to look at having that requirement lifted. And then I also say we do have a bill draft in regards to civil enforcement for unlicensed sales and production. What we have done is simply taken the existing statute as it relates to liquor, and now the OLCC is able to, or how the liens are able to be placed on property for unlicensed liquor sale and production, and simply struck liquor, added marijuana. We have that in draft form. We're invited industry to enter into a dialogue with us. One of the interesting things we have found is that there are some businesses that have spent a tremendous amount of time and money who are to comply with regulations and to invest in this industry, but we don't have the same enforcement tools, sufficient enforcement tools to protect that industry from unlicensed competition. And so we are interested in the conversation in regards to that. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Hall.
Thank you. Madam Co-Chairs, members of the committee, for the record, Rob, legal counsel with the Association of Oregon Counties. I won't repeat anything that Scott said other than just to say ditto. I do want to highlight one thing and kind of put an emphasis on it. He mentioned the distribution formula. This is the time we need to have a conversation about the distribution formula that we didn't have in 15 or 16. In addition to what Scott said about hands tied and inability to audit, the formula itself doesn't work mathematically, and it will fail to actually push the money that we're receiving from the Department of Revenue to where it needs to go. So I have no preconceived notions about what the formula should look like, other than the current formula doesn't work. So let's have that conversation and get that squared away in 17 so we can make sure that these particular tax monies go to places where they need to go. With that, I'll just give you a quick update from the county's perspective. I won't go through all of this stuff like I did in the last.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Senator Byer has a question, and
Could you be a little more explicit on what doesn't work?
Sure. So mathematically, the city's distributions just don't work. I'm not sure how the revenue would calculate. We can get into that, but I guess, Senator, I'd rather talk about the substance. For example, Scott mentioned that distributions to cities and counties pursuant to Measure 91 are dedicated to the enforcement of Measure 91. That's all we can use it for. We can't, for example, use it to increase our capacity to deal with impaired driving. That's DRE stuff that's a desperate need for sheriffs and chiefs. So we don't even have that type of discretion. So that's real problematic. The other problem I see is that the percentages don't seem to make a whole lot of sense, and also where we're pushing the money. For example, I could make out a case for you here right now that Jackson County and Josephine County in particular need more resources than they have. Josephine in particular is really lacking fundamental enforcement mechanisms, and to expect the county to help the industry push out the black market, it's just not going to happen unless we give Josephine County resources to do so.
And the formula won't do that right now. Hopefully that helps a little bit. But I don't want to, I do have recommendations that I would make, but I don't want to essentially, I want to seem flexible. I really do want to seem flexible, and I want to design this formula to where we can actually pretty much
You're pre-perceived, but you want to be perceived flexible.
That's right on the head.
Got it.
All right, I'm going to skip past all of my lingo stuff, get right to the maths. There hasn't been a lot of changes, but there have been some, and we have more time, place, and manner regulations that will be worked on online. We've got a couple other counties that are still working on theirs. Deschutes County repealed their opt-out ordinance and put in place time, place, and manner regulations. That's what the current map kind of looks like right now. In terms of, I'll just make a couple of quick notes here. Some changes since last time. I think I already mentioned 2 of the opt-outs were referred. Both of those referenda failed. Jackson County, I think I mentioned to you last time, had an appeal from their time, place, and manner ordinances to LUBA. Last week, LUBA issued an 18-page opinion going through the analysis and finding Jackson County's TPMs to be reasonable. Those are the updates from that slide. More updates here. So we now know which counties are going out for an election for the 3% local tax and which counties are not. A number of the ones that are in white are just probably going to wait till the next cycle. Doesn't mean they're not going to put one on, but it's just they're not doing it this particular cycle for a variety of reasons. So those are the ones that are actually looking at a tax measure right now. And with that, I'm done with my local update, but I'm not going to go anywhere, I think, because I've got more slides for you in the next panel.
Excellent. Questions? All right, thank you both so much for being here. And then I think that you're going to stay at the desk, and we're going to have Kimberly McCullough come and join you and talk about some teamwork that's been underway regarding the State Controlled Substances Act and MIP law. Welcome. Please go ahead and introduce yourself for the record and let us know where you're.
And again, Madam Co-Chair, members of the committee, for the record, Rob Levette, Legal Counsel, Association of Oregon Counties. We have LC 1086 and 1087 that we're working on. We're still not ready for prime time because we've got lots more bugs to work out. But we've had a task group working on this for quite a number of months. Chair Liner has been kind of head of our little task group. And this really stems from our work in 2015 and 2016, which highlighted the fact that what Measure 91 fundamentally did was it made marijuana no longer a controlled substance in the traditional sense. We've been putting Band-Aids and patches on all of the offense code ever since, but really it creates all of these internal problems with the rest of Oregon revised statutes. And so what your legislative council and I have long agreed on is what we need to do fundamentally is remove marijuana from the State Controlled Substances Act and have it regulated under its own chapter, much like alcohol. That, of course, is a simple thing to say, but it's a monster to write because we have to not only change all of that in substance, which took me about 20 pages to change, then we have to amend a few hundred statutes throughout Oregon revised statutes. So hopefully nobody has to read this on the floor of either the House or the Senate. So we're talking about a full day of reading if that would have been the case. So we finally got it all kind of patched together. And we are proposing to make some additional substantive changes as well. Further crime reductions, eliminating certain ones, while at the same time ensuring that we have offenses that read correctly and have enough oomph to them that we empower law enforcement to help the industry close down the black market. So we have to keep all of that in balance. These are some of the things we've talked about that are on the screen. We've got some more we're still working on. Happy to answer more questions about those. But we do have a second bill, and the only reason we have a second bill is because the relating to clause has to be different. So the big bill I just described is relating to cannabis. But we also need to fix the minor and the possession statutes, but not just the cannabis statutes. We have to make them work together in harmony with alcohol and cannabis. And they don't read the same, plus we have to amend some other statutes to fix them for other problems unrelated to the marijuana law. So we have a second bill, LC 1087, relating to juveniles or minors, I forget which one. So that's my short version of what we've been working on, and I'll turn it over to Kimberly.
Thank you. I'm Kimberly McCullough, Legislative Director with the ACLU of Oregon. Just to like to start by saying we're grateful for the opportunity to have been able to participate in these conversations around right sizing and refining our criminal laws for marijuana. just to frame the issue, in the long term, ACLU of Oregon supports treating marijuana very similar to alcohol under all of our laws and criminal laws in particular. Just for reference, for simple manufacture, delivery, and possession of alcohol, the only criminal penalties for just simply doing those things illegally is a misdemeanor for manufacture of over 100 or 200 gallons of alcohol, depending on how many adults you have in a home, or an A misdemeanor for the first time manufacture of hard alcohol, C misdemeanor for your second time offense. We aren't proposing those analogous penalties today, nor do we think that treating marijuana exactly like alcohol is going to happen overnight. There's obviously things that need to happen before we get there. Federally, we need to be scheduled. The legal market needs to be fully established. Other states around the country need to legalize. So there's a lot that needs to happen before we can really get there. But I just wanted to frame that with our long-term goals. In the meantime, we do think that there are some significant improvements we could make. Rob already outlined the things we've been discussing, but I just want to emphasize why ACLU thinks a few of those things would be really significant improvements, as to taking marijuana out of the Controlled Substances Act, and then also just making the language simpler and cleaner. It's overly complex right now. I've heard from practitioners that it's very, very complicated for them, and they would really appreciate us actually taking it out of the CSA. It doesn't make sense to have it conflated with other drugs that don't have a legal market. As far as the 1,000 feet of a school distinction, we don't have something similar to that for alcohol. And in the marijuana context, this distinction leads to disparities actually for youth who are penalized for marijuana crimes, and then also for people who live in urban areas. To be clear, we're not advocating for reducing criminal penalties for crimes that are actually specifically related to harm to youth. So delivery to youth, right? But it's just this 1,000 feet of a school distinction doesn't really make sense here. As far as tiering out the penalties a bit, we just have realized that with some of our thresholds, you go from legal activity to a harsh penalty. And we just think it makes sense to have a little bit of a buffer zone with a somewhat lower penalty, so people who just barely go over aren't getting hit with these really severe penalties. We're hoping to reach consensus, or at least a broad amount of consensus on this bill. We don't want it to be something that's super controversial, so we're working really hard to try to get stakeholders at the table that can help make that happen. And just over the last few years, things have moved really fast, and we just think it's worth it to take the time to look at things carefully now and craft really good policy that works for everyone. So I'd be happy to talk to any of you more about this in detail at any time, so feel free to reach out.
Great. Thank you. So thank you to the team that's been working on this work, and I know that Representative Olson, we've been trying to kind of get your input, and we're going to need to socialize this and get input much more broadly from in this committee, and potentially if this committee separates and this work goes to the Judiciary Committee instead, we will potentially do that. But we started early so that we could do the kind of careful consensus building and walking through that needs to happen. I want to thank Mark Mayer, because it's been really hard. There's a lot of provisions involved to harmonize as we move forward. So thank you, everybody. And now I'm going to invite, thank you, and you can be dismissed. And we've got, as our last two panelists, I'm going to invite them up together. Senator Edwards, who's going to speak about the Cannabis Research Task Force findings, and Jesse Horton, who's going to speak about the Cannabis Environmental Best Practice Task Force recommendations. These are two work groups that have been in action over the last 9 months or so, and have come forward with some recommendations that will probably inform legislative concepts that people bring in this year, and I wanted to have people have a chance to hear from each of you. So thank you. Let's start with Senator Edwards, and thank you both for being here.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Chris Edwards. I'm the state senator representing a bunch of Eugene and Junction City. I've enjoyed the opportunity to work with a good chair on a work group developing, fleshing out what some legislative concepts might look like for this next legislative session that involved the implementation of task force recommendations on cannabis research. So as I first came to the issue, because I was, as you know, and as we worked on last session, with a particular interest in research and conducting research on the medical, medicinal properties and potential of cannabis. As I started down that path, I learned that there were a lot of legislators that had a particular interest in public safety research and public health research. And then just as we have Oregon State College of Agriculture and Agricultural Sciences and OSU Extension, they're able to do research and education around traditional agricultural practices in the state. Of course, they're prohibited by federal law for providing those same services for cannabis research. So there's an obvious need for that type of research as well. So we got to looking at the issue over the course of the task force and in the interim, and we've developed a concept to establish a bill that would require the OLCC to enter into an agreement with a non-governmental entity to conduct research around those specific areas: public health, public safety, medical research, agricultural practices, enhancement of the commercial value of cannabis, and improving environmental practices. So those are kind of the 5 areas of research that would be covered and would be enabled through this agreement. The concept would also establish an oversight committee, and that oversight committee would consist of experts in public safety policy, public health policy, agricultural practices, medical practices. Would also include a marijuana business licensee and a marijuana testing lab licensee. All the research conducted would, with partially or in whole or in part funded by public monies, would be public information and would be made available to the Oversight Committee and to the OLCC and the legislature annually, and posted on the website of the Research Institute. The Research Institute would be subject to Secretary of State audits, would be subject to inspection of financial records by OLCC, and the board members or officers of the non-governmental Research Institute would be subject to conflict of interest laws in much the same manner as public officials. And so we have left the question of how such a research institute and such a research contract would be funded. We have left that open. There are certainly a lot of well, anytime you get into funding, there's going to be some sort of controversy, and there are going to be strong opinions about it. So we have left that open and undetermined at this time, and look forward to the input of stakeholders and legislators as we march toward the next legislative session and try to come up with a good funding source for said research. So that's a rough outline of the legislative concept we've been working on, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Do you have a question? And I want to, I'm going to jump in first and say, I really appreciate the teamwork that we've had as we've tried to develop a way to support needed research so that we can explore the potential benefits of cannabis, and opportunities for our cannabis businesses to serve community needs. And there's probably a fair amount of adjusting or refining that we may need to do as we work with legislators and stakeholders, but we felt like we could get the ball rolling by developing a concept that made sense to a team of us, so that we could start having conversations with a larger group about what would work more broadly. And that's one of the reasons why Senator Edwards is here, sort of describing the kinds of things that we're interested in, so that we can get to it, I guess, hopefully as we get into the session. So with that, Senator Brill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I just want to highlight the importance of the work Senator Edwards is doing, and how this committee is a bicameral, bipartisan organization really needs to stay together and keep their eye on the ball. A number of members of this committee worked very hard getting resolutions in national organizations for access to banking and the unscheduled cannabis. The DEA came out with a very strong statement against descheduling marijuana, or you can extrapolate access to banking. And I think it's really interesting that the DEA opposes access to banking and rescheduling on the basis that there's a lack of bona fide medical research showing that there's a medical benefit to cannabis. So I think it's fascinating that the prohibition against any sort of research into cannabis is now being used to block the research and to block the access to banking. So the theory is if enough states get together in a bicameral, bipartisan manner and provide enough cover, the cowards in Congress will move forward to remove these obstacles. I guess I'm sure that brings it up very nicely for Senator Edwards.
If I could and give some credit for where credit is due, Senator Ferriola's office, Andrea back there, and Representative Leininger just did an amazing job at the National Conference of State Legislatures, bringing it to national attention with this statewide group. There's thousands of people come to this convention. They got it passed, which requires a 75% vote. It wasn't easy, but kudos to both of your offices for taking the lead on that, because I think over time, as we continue this on, we will make progress.
Senator Kumar.
I was going to say the same thing, ditto to this, because of what the work you all done and actually taking it to that next level. But it's ironic, Senator Ferrioli, that we're hearing the same excuse, same rationale 45 years later, that this is exactly what happened back in the early 70s, that the feds used for the exact same reason for not moving forward, because there was no medical research verifying it. So we'll do it state by state, that's what it takes.
Representative Buckley.
Senator Evans, I think the concept's great, one concept. Have you gotten far enough in the discussion you have a ballpark idea like how much it would cost to do this work?
I've tried to nail down stakeholders that know more about research than I do. Of course, people want as much as possible, and I have advised them that most likely won't happen in the legislative process. So one number, a very small universe of people have identified the number of 20 million as something that would really launch an appropriation of 20 million. And so you know better than anybody on the committee what it takes to come up with 20 million as co-chair.
Over what period of time, Chris?
I believe that was a biennial number. So.
I was hoping for like $7.81.
I guess the point is, I don't care if you oppose or support the concept of legalization. It doesn't really matter. How can you be opposed to research that gives people the answers to questions that they have about the health and safety of the medical or recreational use? That makes no sense to me. And it doesn't matter what side of the issue you're on, we should eliminate the barriers to that research. If we did eliminate the barriers, we wouldn't have to appropriate funds from the state legislature. There would be enough interest in crowdfunding and in research institutions and charitable and fraternal organizations and nonprofits, NGOs, that if we could interest an organization like OHSU or some of the other research facilities that are available to us, I don't think we would have to do anything except provide them with additional limitation to get research done.
That's a great point. All right, thank you so much. That was really helpful. And now we have. Okay, great. We have Mr. Horton as our final presenter for the day to talk about the cannabis environmental best practices work. And we're nearing the end of the time, but we will, out of respect for your contribution, we would love to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, and your contribution as well. Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. I'm very pleased to be here to join you today to talk about a very, very important topic, the work that's been done by the Task Force on Cannabis Environmental Best Practice. I'm sorry, excuse me. My name is Jesse Horton. I am a cannabis business owner in Portland, Oregon, as well as the chairman of the Minority Cannabis Business Association that's focused on bringing more people of color into the industry and helping them to benefit from the industry as well. And also, I am a representative, or I'm a member of this task force. So I think this is extremely important work that's been done. I want to commend Representative Leininger, as well as the other representatives that were on the committee. It was a committee of a number of different entities coming together to talk about a very important issue. Senator Beyer, I believe Senator Cruz were on the committee as well. All of the task force members have really expressed a sentiment that Oregon, as a model of energy efficiency and environmental responsibility, and as the producer of the best cannabis in the world. Maybe all the representatives didn't say that, but that's definitely Representative Leininger did make that comment, just for the record. Should really lead the way in the intersection of these two realms. We believe that if the legislature really supports these recommendations, that Oregon will be well on its way to this goal of really leading the rest of the country and the rest of the world in this very, very important topic. So if we're looking at these 4 recommendations, they're really centered heavily around education, as well as around access to resources and fixing some of the legislative pieces that maybe hinder energy efficiency in the current industry. The first being helping producers and other stakeholders access information and technical assistance to support use of environmental best practices with regard to electricity and water and cannabis production. If you can imagine where the industry has gone from where it is from where it has gone, is a very legal place where people don't really care about these things, right? They're more worried about getting product out of the door and doing it at a very, the very kind of low-key scale. And now that we've come into this open industry where people have the opportunity to do some of these things, to invest in some of this technology, to do some of these process changes to improve their particular operation, the knowledge and the access to knowledge from the people who have been doing it for years and years is not really there. So I think from my background in energy efficiency and industrial processes, that the #1 thing that you can do to changing this type of mentality is education, and really getting out there using these industry associations, using the Energy Trust, and using other really knowledgeable people to get out there into these communities and talk about what people can do to improve their energy efficiency. The second recommendation is the support the creation of a third-party certification program to encourage efficient use of water and energy in cannabis production. We know, and I, as a producer myself, we want to make improvements. We want to contribute to this energy efficiency picture, and we also know that it's going to help us to reduce our dollars, but it's hard sometimes to invest those dollars. So the more that we can do to get people really voluntary means to want to do these things is going to be better. And we really think that a third-party certification program is going to give people the ability to help to differentiate their business based on this particular issue, which certainly will matter to Oregonians. The third recommendation is to support the completion of research into environmental best practices as well as other needed research. We had a great presentation a couple minutes ago about research, and I didn't hear whether or not environmental best practices was included in that particular guideline, but we think without a doubt research is important for the efficacy of cannabis for other reasons, but for environmental best practices, we need the research on lighting technology, we need the research on how this is affecting efficacy and what this means to the overall consumer. And the final recommendation is to explore the issue of water regulations for small farms. I'm by no means an expert in this, however, I do understand that because of some of the limitations on having water rights for a small commercial operation really doesn't align with the growers who have been in a medical operation that have less than a ½ acre who have not been required to have those water rights. And we're not necessarily recommending that we change that, but we do understand that there's going to be issues in these medical growers wanting to come over into the commercial space with that very important piece of water right. And we also understand that there's conflict in general as it relates to just general commercial production in these small grow type of situations. So we really want the legislature to look at that and determine whether or not changes need to be made.
Thank you so much. And I want to note that we are considering environmental best practice research as part of the scope of work of the Research Institute to incorporate that recommendation as well. You did great work. Representative Wilson also was part of that committee, and I know that you would know that. Thank you. That was really helpful. Does anyone have questions about this set of recommendations? Representative Buckley.
Did you discuss, are there third-party certification organizations already existing that could step into this?
Very good, yes. There are third-party certifications. One of the things that we did, as you know, is we brought in a number of different people, a number of different entities to talk about these. And one of the groups that we did bring in were third-party certification programs like Oregon. I can't remember the names of them right now because there's a couple, but we looked at 3 different organizations that are kind of homegrown here in Oregon, or one of them is actually from California. Certified Kind was one of them, and also Resource Innovation Institute, of course, is an organization that I currently sit on the board with right now that is looking directly at these issues of implementing water efficiently, and I think doing it very, very well. So I hope we can work with the group here in the future.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, I know a lot of us have to get on to next meetings, and so I'll close the informational hearing and thank everyone for being here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.